All right, hey guys, this is Dr. Bhavesh Patel, and I'm here with Nate, who's my health coach at Cetogenics. He does all the exercise and nutritional programming for our patients, and one of the main reasons we have so much success. We're always continuously learning at Cetogenics and in the medical practice, and we've recently both started using a continuous glucose monitor. So we're just going to chat. It's been our first week talking about just measuring our glucose levels and seeing what our experiences are. There's a lot of theory, a lot of things that we teach from a principle standpoint, but to see it in action and some of the revelations have just been really neat, so I just wanted to record it. So Nate, thanks a lot for getting on camera. I know it's like everything.
Whatever.
So anyway, so let's talk about like the glucose monitor. So what it is, obviously, is it's a way to monitor your glucose levels continuously. It's a device that you put into your arm. You can put it in other places of your body, but it's always reading your glucose levels, and it's a little different than sticking your finger. First of all, you don't have to stick your finger, which is nice, but when you stick your finger, you're getting a blood measurement. In this kind of setting, you're getting a measurement of what's called interstitial fluid. So there's a little bit of a delay between when the glucose gets or the sugar gets into your bloodstream and then into the fluids. So there's a bit of a delay there. We've kind of experienced some of that too. So
Yeah, just kind of jumping into it too, it's like you mentioned about the finger stick. When I first put it in, it's a little disconcerting when you put it in at first and you see it, but actually like right when you stick it in, you don't even feel it, and I've done, had various blood draws and stuff like that. You definitely feel those in this. I mean, if it wasn't for, occasionally looking over, I know it's there, obviously. And then you mentioned about, sticking your finger. Oh, I got obsessed with this thing. And I would not want to stick my fingers as much as the times I actually checked it, especially in the beginning from the jump, too. So
yeah, it's kind of funny because the device is a little intimidating and it makes a big loud snap when it hits your arm.
Right.
And I didn't feel it going at all. And then I was like, is it even in? And then I pulled away the device and it was stuck to my skin. So
yeah. And we'll get into it, but I've worked out, I've showered, everything that you worry about, and I've never had any issues with it.
Yeah, for me, the most I felt was like just maybe a little bit like I feel like I had to scratch my skin, like a little bit of an itch the whole time. But that's about it, and certainly not any real pain or anything like that.
Yeah.
So anyway, so you had gotten it first, and you told me about it, so I bought it the same day, but mine had gotten delivered to somebody else, so I didn't have to right away. So you had a little bit of a jump, but do you remember some of the stuff from the first couple of days that you noticed?
Yeah, so initially I wanted to do it. I've always wanted to do it. The interesting thing about it is I kind of put it in the back of my mind because, this is something that's usually curtailed to the diabetic population. And so it kind of has that kind of the natural protocol for insurance-based kind of ways in which you obtain it. Of course, you do need a prescription, but it's nice to work under a doctor. So,
Yeah, all right.
But even that, it's it was something that I was interested in all the time. And then when I saw this option available to do it, we used a website that kind of offered this ability to do it, but it was initially something that I want to look at in terms of endurance training and what impacts the nutritional needs are when you're on a course, like Ironman for long periods of time, and like kind of really matching those levels. And kind of fortuitously, I got injured. I've been on the shelf a little bit, and I already got it. And I'm like, I'm just going to start sampling it, and so I got a little ahead of the time before you.
I was just going to reiterate, so that you were just going to do it because you were doing it as a performance athlete training for the triathlon, and you wanted to see how your sugars were going to be while you're training as an athlete.
Yeah.
And then obviously you got benched a little bit because of whatever, and then so then you started to use it differently. And you're using it more like how I'm using it because I just want to see how much food I can eat or what
And I think
how it's impacting me.
I do have the intention of doing the endurance or performance-based analysis on it. The N of 1, or just kind of doing the anecdotal stuff. But for now, it was crazy when I started it to see things that I already knew, but it was very apparent when you got that empirical data that showed. And just kind of my first tries was our trial of it was to kind of test what blood sugars would do and how my response would be and what I was feeling, you know, just qualitatively too. And so I ate 2 cookies.
Yeah.
First night,
Right.
and wow, it was very eye-opening for how
What did you
rapid
start
my
with? What did you go
response was.
to?
So I started my levels, and this is something that we checked too and verified that it takes about 24 hours for it to really settle in terms of getting
For the monitor.
the monitor, yeah, for consistency. And then, so, you know, my levels started out kind of higher than I would have thought. They were about 115 on average. And
Yeah, and also this is also interstitial fluids. I think maybe it's not the same as the reference ranges are probably different than blood levels.
right.
But anyways, your baseline was that.
It was high, and it was a little alarming, and I was
Yeah.
like, but you know, after talking to you, you noted that it does take 24 hours for the sensor to get a little bit more accurate.
Yeah.
Not to say that it's inaccurate, but and then after that, so I did another test the next day, and I did the same thing. I did the cookies, and my normal was around 100, 90-ish to 100, and it same thing though. It shot up the first time I did it. In the 24 hours was like 170,
Yeah.
and then it just plummeted.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and you know, just to go off of like what actually happens too, not just the numbers, but the numbers also were associated with my feeling too. So right after it started dropping down, and it got down and hovered about 130s and stayed there for a while, I was tired. I was just like zapped, you know, like energy wise. So.
And this is something we talk about with our patients all the time, is we tell them never to eat a carbohydrate alone. I've been doing this for 11 years, and of course, like, you know, that's mostly how I do it, but there's a lot of times when I'm just eating the cookie, you just kind of forget, you gotta get used to the information, or you don't think it's as important, you're not as connected to the teachings, and I know you did it again with the protein.
Yeah, so we you know, kind of tested out this idea that, you know, when you add protein or something, you know, a molecule of like more sustenance like fat.
Yeah.
I did protein, for instance, and it sounds silly, but like I did the 2 cookie trial again, and I ate, you know, a couple pieces of turkey just to see what happens. And normally I'd never pair that. You eat a cookie, you're just like, I want a cookie, you know?
Yeah, right.
But I did it in you know, in the need of science, I should say, but just to try it out. And, you know, the spike was blunted completely. Like it was 100, I think I topped out at just under 130.
Yeah, I think you said 126.
Yeah, 126, and it did not stay up there very long, and it went down shortly after.
So this was kind of cool. So like, you know, we always tell people about like how sugar affects insulin levels, and when the glucose levels start to go up, the insulin goes up with it, and as the insulin goes up, the sugar starts to go down. The insulin kind of stays up there, but that's when you start getting that hypoglycemic thing, your energy starts going down, and then you have to redose the carbohydrates. So that's why we always say, okay, make sure you eat a healthy fat or healthy protein along with it. I mean, a turkey sandwich with 2 cookies probably doesn't sound.
Well, it wasn't even the sandwich. I took just, you know, pieces of turkey just to shut it down. But to that point,
since you've done that test though, I decided like, okay, I wasn't going to repeat that test because you did one with Pepsi, I think too, right?
Yeah. So one of them I trialed in Pepsi too, just to see. You know, I was just trying to push the upper limits of it, you know, see what's the impact. And I do have, there's definitely, and this is individualized too, because everybody's not different. We'll get to a couple of things that I did comparatively that we didn't think would, you know, naturally occur. But with the Pepsi, it was right in line with spiking it up substantially. I think if anything.
So, go ahead.
I was going to say 2 things that we give our daughter, you know, we know too, it's just kind of a treat, but we give her fruit snacks.
Right.
And I tried that alone, and I tried Pepsi alone, and those were by far the ones that spiked it so
the most.
Just so like,
even more than the cookie.
Yeah, even more than the cookie.
So fruit snack. No, so my daughter is not eating. She always asks me if she could have a cookie or candy anyway. And she, you know, I'm always gonna say yes because she's my girl. So not saying no.
Right.
But now I'll be like, yeah, but you gotta go eat the protein first. So she'll go get a piece of cheese or something.
Yeah.
Whether it's provolone or mozzarella or cheddar or whatever's in the fridge. She'll eat some of that, or maybe a little protein. Then she'll go eat the sweet. So I did that already because of what your experience was.
And just kind of touching on that too is for parents out there too, is that, you know, especially when we were brought up, you had that treat alone.
Yeah.
this could be something that you could do to, and kids have a different metabolism, you know.
Yeah.
But
We're
I
going to
think,
process it faster, but still habit-wise, and we still know the sugar's still going to affect them
yeah,
regardless.
it's something that lifelong they could do,
Yeah.
especially when they get up in there.
So I got the levels a couple days later. You'd already told me that, so I decided to do a different test. It was St. Patrick's week, so it was a week of Jameson's. So I had gone to this restaurant where I went there to do a little work, but they only sold frozen pepperoni pizzas at the bar and Jameson. So I had a Jameson, it was a double Jameson, and I had basically a 9-inch round pepperoni pizza. And I was watching my sugars, and they were around 100, 108. It was the first day, so it was in the first 24 hours where the thing was still calibrating. But my sugars went up to about 170. But it's funny because it was a whole pepperoni pizza. It actually was like a real thin crust, so I ordered another one.
But like
so
personal size.
Personal size.
Yeah.
So 9-inch, but then I ate a little bit more of a second one, and it got up to 170, and it started to come back down again. But it's interesting because 2 cookies versus whiskey and a pepperoni pizza, thin crust, the sugar spike was the same as your 2 cookies.
Yeah.
Right? And then the other thing I had figured out, so later that night I took my daughter out for dinner, and we went to an Italian restaurant, so we split a salad, so we got some fiber and greens and all that on board, and we split a pasta. And I was going to keep it there, and I'm watching the sugars the whole time, but because we're neighborhood people, and it was crowded, and they just wanted to say, hey, thanks for coming over, because there's some out-of-town people in. So they gave us a free dessert. So my daughter's pretty cute, so she seems to manage to get all these free desserts. So of course we eat like this deconstructed cannoli. So we're both stuffed. And even my daughter's just like stuffed, and she says, let's walk around the neighborhood before we go home, because this is too much food.
Right.
So I'm checking the sugars as we're walking, and the sugars were fine. I mean, I think they got up to like the 120, 130-ish range, and maybe not even 130 while I was walking. And then as soon as I got home and sat down, I just saw them climb to like 140, 150. I think I'm gonna get more than 160,
Right.
but they still started to climb once I stopped my activity level of just walking. But the worst part is, I think because we were stuffed, so I was checking my sugars overnight, and the nice thing about the monitor is, is that it gives you readings all through the night.
Yeah.
So I checked a couple manually if I happen to wake up, but otherwise you still kind of get to see. And I was like in the 125 range, 126 range, it seems like.
So it stayed, it peaked, but it stayed elevated.
It stayed elevated for about 13 hours. It didn't come back down to 100 till 13 hours later.
Jeez.
And I think that's just because of the volume of food, because it was just still. So the next time we went to eat, and it was Asian food, and I said, okay, well, now that I know I don't want to have too many carbs, I ordered a meat dish that was mostly protein-based meat.
Okay.
And I didn't eat much of the rice. I had a little bit of the noodles, a little bit of the rice for taste. And also, when I started getting full, I just knew I didn't want to have this situation where my blood sugars were elevated all night long.
Yeah,
right?
so it's like, I kind of was the same way too. It's like, it was fun testing stuff.
Yeah.
But the same token, it was like one thing that I was able to educate myself right away on. And it's stuff that you know, but again, back to the empirical data, is the numbers didn't lie. It told me that your metabolism isn't the same anymore. You're not, 18, 20 years old anymore. So you definitely, it made me more cognizant of what my choices would be. And even if I do want to, and I'm not saying I'll never have, a cookie or anything like that, but it's more about timing of it.
Right.
And then also like how in which you do it. And I think it's at moderation for sure.
Yeah, moderation definitely makes a difference. So the next time with that Asian meal, the sugars definitely stayed closer to like the 100, 110 range overnight. Still wasn't perfect because it was still kind of a big meal. I think maybe it was one time, but it was definitely lower the next night compared to the night that we definitely ate too much food, right? So like it kind of made me like decide not to eat as much and then be more careful. But then we had gone out for St. Patrick's Day, like March 17th. We went out to lunch, and again it's St. Patrick's Day, so Chicago, it's a big deal. We're going out. We're just having lunch, but we ordered a salmon. We ordered a Caesar salad with some blackened salmon, but then we also ordered some fish and chips. And then we also, I think when we had like one beer, we didn't want to have like more because we just
everybody, the place was a total Irish pub, like all Irish fare there, Guinness, everything, and
Well, even though it was, and I took a sip of it, when it's too sweet. I said I just didn't want to have the sugar, and I just forgot to give you the other thing.
Yeah.
So when the food came out, I was like, well, I'm going straight for the blackened salmon first because I wanted that protein and fat on board before I ate the crispy stuff with the carbs and everything in it.
Yeah.
And then those sugars stayed really clean too. And I think I told you about the other test that I did. So I went out to just another like sort of pub like place around my house, and I had ordered steak nachos and Jameson, which by the way I'm pretty much done. The St. Patrick's Day is over, but it was like JMO week, especially because I was like the consistent drink to try different places. But anyway, I had the Jameson, I had steak nachos, but I ate the steak and I ate the chimichurri sauce and the guacamole mostly, and I ate just a few chips with the cheese and some of the salsa, and my sugar never went above 106. Like
wow.
It was a state totally simple. And I came in, started around somewhere in like low 90s or mid 90s. What was interesting about that one though, so I was doing the intermittent fasting at the time, and I was like definitely feeling like starving, hungry, almost at hypoglycemic, like I want to eat kind of thing. And so I was feeling that, and I started eating the food, and I just knew I didn't want the sugars to spike, so I was being careful about both the what I was eating, like the macros, so the protein versus the carbs, and I was eating slower because I didn't want it to spike up.
Yeah.
Right? Now it took me honestly for about 30 minutes. I think I still felt kind of like I wanted to dive into the nachos, but I just because I knew I had to monitor on, I knew I was trying to keep that sugar control in balance. I just kind of went slow with the meal. I was more focused on what the right foods were. And then as I monitored this, and then of course the hunger went away a little later than I would have liked. It was later, it was after I got done eating or almost towards the end where I wasn't really hungry anymore. So it took a minute. And if I just went based only on hunger, I probably would have just dove into the nachos, I would have eaten faster or whatever. But anyway, so again, like I said, my sugar never really went above 106, even like after the meal was over and an hour later or whatever.
Well, you bring up an interesting point too that most of us do nowadays. Is we're in the Western world where it's quick, like everything's quick, large portions, and mentally, my mom as I grew up always said like, yeah, finish your plate. And so I think that mentality kind of translates over later in life too, and a lot of our patients struggle with this where they are eating too much and they don't, but it's like it's for lack of a better term, it's like we have fish brains because we forget and we continuously do that.
Right.
And then we don't see the writing on the wall when we talk about energy levels, sustained energy levels. And that's, you brought up intermittent fasting. I have a lot of, where it makes sense, like I'll suggest that to some patients to do. Mm-hmm. And the feedback when they're consistent with it is, I feel, like lack of energy, blah, 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 for like the first 3 or 4 days. And then like after week 1, it's like, my energy levels are sustained, it's great.
Right.
And I think what happens eventually is that they're not bogged down by eating food constantly and quite a bit of massive amounts of food. So not to get too far off the specific topic of the constant glucose monitor, but it makes it more understanding, where you get that instant feedback of why you feel like that. And so for you in that particular instance, you made very specific choices on the quantity of food, and then you also, even though you're given all this food, you picked out the proper foods that you knew were not going to cause that issue and that reaction.
And it's funny because it's what I used to do when I first started Cetogenics as a patient back in 2009. Mm-hmm. I would deconstruct the meal in front of me and choose the best way to eat it. And I did that for a long time, and I think I just kind of got busy, kind of
fish brain.
I kind of get back into
life happens.
Yeah, kind of I'm not really done. I'll start my diet properly tomorrow.
It's always tomorrow.
Yeah, exactly. I'll do it for a few days, and I'll be like, I'm hanging out with it's birthday. I gotta eat birthday cake.
There's always
something, right?
There's always something. Yeah.
So this kind of for me just was eye-opening again. It just kind of woke me back up again in a sense, because you get the real-time feedback, and I think that's what's really neat. Because before you're sort of again, when I first started this program, and most of our patients are like this too. you're motivated, you know what the end result you want to get is, but that end result does take time, and you're not seeing that immediate feedback.
Yeah, you don't get to see the results.
Right.
Because we look at results, generally speaking, on a scale or how we look, things like that.
Right.
And those are very tough, and those take, weeks, if not months, to actually see any real benefit to it. So things like you're talking about, this is an immediate response, and it's also it's a lifestyle modifier, because again, you get changes based on. I feel like
maybe I'm losing weight with it. I'm not sure yet. It's only been a week, but it doesn't matter because I know I'm targeting like the sugar levels and the metabolism. I think that'll pan out.
Yeah, we know based on many studies and all these different low carb diets and stuff. People lose weight, and there is a calorie restriction to some extent, but that's not the point of this. The point is metabolically what's happening when you eat these types of food, and just kind of one thing I alluded to earlier was bananas.
Oh, this is a great one. So real quick, there's a concept that we think about at Cenogenics, and a lot of doctors do, and this is especially before the era of like keto diets and low carb and when all that stuff was sort of bad. But there's one thesis of eating where you're eating every 3 hours, you're keeping your sugar levels constant throughout the day, and that still may be right for some people. That's why this glucose monitor is cool, because intermittent fasting is probably not for everybody. Some people might need to eat every 3 hours.
Yeah.
If their sugars are all over the place.
You asked me today. You're like, you probably forgot, but you asked today. You're like, oh, I ate an early lunch.
Yeah.
He's like, you're not intermittent fasting, which I generally am a practitioner of it.
Yeah.
But since using the glucose monitor, there was times where, again, trying to keep it in a tighter range, I was actually dipping low.
Yeah,
I was getting down into the 70s, and I didn't necessarily have hunger cues because, it was disordered eating at the time because of cookies and random other stuff.
Right.
But, it started to plummet a little bit, so I made sure to eat in advance. And
So I know you've been really doing it that way, which is, I'm still trying to intermittent fast and see if my body, for me right now, see if my body will stabilize into a glycemic control that fits intermittent fasting. It may not. It may be that intermittent fasting is not right for me.
Yeah.
I don't know yet. We'll see.
At least you have some type of data to prove.
But I'm gonna try intermittent fasting, see if my body sugar metabolism adapts to intermittent fasting, or if it never will, maybe I'm gonna be that guy. I do need to eat like that protein breakfast or whatever.
Right.
But anyway, so we're talking about the banana. And so in the concept of low glycemic index eating, there's basically a lab test that you do for foods, and you see how much sugar or calories are burned.
There's basically some type of calculation that they use per food, and it's general for the population. So it's on a scale of 1 to 100. And then, certain foods, I forget the exact parameters, but certain foods, have a glycemic index number. They have a glycemic
and the higher the glycemic index, the more likely it is to raise your blood sugar. That's the point of it. That's the point of it, right? So there's these tables. You can type in low glycemic index foods or table or whatever into Google, and you get a list. Here's a glycemic index for rice. Here's a glycemic index for bananas. Here's what it is for chicken or beef. And you can see, so you're supposed to eat low GI foods. Turns out bananas is technically a high GI food. But that's not a study that's done in the body. It's done outside the body. And you did what we call an in vivo study. You ate the banana.
Yeah, I ate a banana, in the morning, fasted. So it's it was all banana. That was it. And it didn't even spike. It was like, I was under 110 the entire time. I started at like 90, 97 or something like that. And it just...
So that's what's kind of wild, because, I know that, so there's fiber in bananas, that's supposed to help dampen the glycemic spike. But in your body, for you, bananas does not have that impact. Now maybe for somebody else, it might, I don't know, we'd have to just, I'm like, I'll go try banana. But I barely eat a banana in 10 years because of the GI
index. We've been told for the longest time. And so it's always that better, best situation, but this at least gives you, the background data on what it's going to do. And so I did the same kind of test with the other fruit I tested was strawberries, right? And I'm not sure I know strawberries are probably higher up on that for sure because they are, natural sugars, of course, but it spiked to 132.
That's amazing.
And it dropped, rather rapidly, and I didn't feel any sluggishness or anything like that because it's not, processed sugar, of course, but.
It came down pretty fast?
Yeah, it came down pretty fast, but it was just interesting to see that the levels were different based off of, fruit. Of course, you could categorize fruit in different ways, but for me, strawberries for sure.
My wife was just in London, and she was telling me how the strawberries there and the raspberries there were actually a lot smaller than what we get in the States, and they were just so much more delicious.
Oh, I can already say too, just based off of that, we did our honeymoon in Costa Rica, and stayed at like a tree house, and the limes were the size of oranges. And when you cut them open, they look like lemons on the inside.
Really? Wow.
It was so bizarre, and it tastes so good, but it's just, here it's definitely a different process.
I mean, the strawberries here, like, we look, they're on steroids, but they don't have
there's a whole industry for.
I think that's why people dip them in chocolate.
That too, but there's an industry for, like, battered foods, foods that don't look, delicious, that can't be on the shelf.
Have you tried that yet? I forgot the name of the company that does it. But
I had some friends that did it at one point. Imperfect Foods, I think it's called.
Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Might give that a try.
But yeah.
So, alright, so for me, like, the nacho thing was kind of an aha. The volume of food was an aha moment. Just having a monitor. Obviously, when you and I both when we first started, we check it like every 2 or 3 minutes, and we start to stabilize. But it is so eye-opening, and I don't think I've done anything that has been as behavior modifying so quickly, unless I had just willed it. Like if I just said, like, I'm going to stop. If I'm going to go, I decide I'm going to go on a cleanse or a fast, right?
Even in terms of feedback, right?
In terms of feedback, because the other stuff you just like say, okay, I will myself to be vegetarian for a month, and I've done that before, it's fine, But this is more like, okay, I ate something, I saw how I did, and I'm going to modify the next meal, I'm going to modify the next night.
Right.
Right? I mean, that's what's kind of interesting to me, because it's already making, my neighbors just got a green egg. As you know, I'm a big fan of the barbecue and the green egg and all that. And so they had so they made their first cook, they did some pulled pork. It was very good for their first cook, I thought, I was impressed. But there's also some homemade cookies there, there's some pasta, salad, and all that, right? And I was just like, I'll just take a couple bites of that, but I started to making sure I was primarily protein based. I was a little, I don't know if I was average or less on barbecue sauce, but that's got a lot of sugar in it.
Yeah, so I was going to ask you that too, is because a lot of people get into that barbecue and they do a bunch. I mean, I got into, smoking stuff, meats and stuff. And it's great, but then you also realize it too when I made my own rub. And 90% of it's sugar. It's quite a bit of, so it's not, it just goes to show sugar is put in a lot of things. And you mentioned barbecue sauces, a lot of people those go hand in hand, but it's kind of back to the nacho situation. It's get the things that are going to impact you the most.
Right.
So the protein side of things. A little less on the side of the barbecue.
I do think really good barbecue doesn't need any sauce. So
true, I agree.
If it's done well, I won't really
my dad
any sauce on there.
would be proud of you because he used to say, if anybody puts A1 sauce or anything on a steak, he's gonna take it right from your plate. So,
that's so. Anyway, we're gonna figure out what I'm gonna do next with it. But we talked a little bit about exercise. I've been kind of checking. I haven't found anything super tied in with exercise yet. And it's really kind of weird because I'm getting, for me, overnight my sugars are pretty low, but right before I wake up, they are starting to kind of go up automatically. Like today I woke up and the sugars were a little up. And I think that's, it's because of the cortisol levels are starting to come up. I mean, they're supposed to be the highest in the morning anyways before you wake up. But I don't know if this morning spike.
Cortisol, you mean? Right?
Cortisol, yeah, I'm sorry, so cortisol. So my so between 4 a.m. and 5 a.m. my sugar just went from 90 something to 120 something. And I was asleep. So I think my cortisol was going up and it was causing my blood sugar to go up. But when it was at the highest blood sugar level, that's when I also woke up and I was awake and I'm ready to hit the gym. I was at the gym by 5:15, so 15 minutes later I was at the gym and the sugar had come down a bit. And
did you see a subsequent spike during the gym though when you were there?
Well, I think we talked about it. So it kind of went a little bit up and down. It stayed pretty tight in a narrow band, but it was going up and down a little bit, but within 10 points. So it could just be margin of error.
So I'm calling you out on your intensity then.
Huh?
I said I'm calling you out on your
I
intensity.
did sweat. I was breathing hard. I mean, I didn't get like a hard sweat.
So
but, yeah.
So when we look at, like, if we get into exercise, I'm going to look at like the glycolytic system, right?
Yeah.
So those sprints or the high
Trying to
intensity
sprint,
intervals and stuff like that. Yeah, I mean, you're huffing and puffing. That's a little bit, of the, cardiovascular side of things just working. But
Yeah.
we're talking about like super fatiguing sprints,
Right.
like intervals and stuff like that. And I tested this part out as much as I could with the current back issue I had, but and it spiked up to like into the 120s, and then after the exercise dropped down. But that's because we see that in the absence, because the demand for glucose is high for that fast movement, and then it drops essentially because of.
Mine was going up and down. I think I started off with sled work, and that was a little bit more like intense that way, and it started to go. But then when I started I did like lat pull down, low back, weightlifting type stuff, and I think that is when it didn't go up as much. But I don't know. I haven't done as much.
For the exercise testing.
Yeah, I haven't done as much. I mean, I've measured it, but I haven't seen a pattern yet. But having said that, I mean, I think I'm gonna go hit Orange Theory just up near my house. So I might do the Orange Theory, or I think I still have some sessions at various boot camp. That's obviously a lot more intense and high intensity oriented. So I'm kind of curious to see what happens.
Yeah, you should see a steady spike with that. And when we talk about spikes, this isn't a bad spike. What's happening is your body's demanding the energy. It needs glucose quickly.
Yeah.
So what does it do through opposite channels of actually eating? And we know this because the spike goes up and you haven't ate anything.
Yeah.
Like, where did that spike come from?
Right.
Well, it's because the release of glucose that's stored in different
glycogen in the liver.
through the liver or through muscle glycogen, your body gets flooded so that there's glucose in the blood for energy.
Right.
And then it drops back down because it gets utilized and so on and so forth. And that's getting ahead. The timing of these carbohydrates, and this is what I talk to patients about, this is why it's important. Especially for people who are doing like high intensity interval and stuff, that if you are going to have carbs on board, the absolute best time to do it is directly after exercise.
Is that right? Okay.
Immediately after high intensity exercise.
Okay.
And when I talk
not before.
Not before, unless the only time I tell people to eat is beforehand. If you're lightheaded or something like that.
Okay.
Which you can test with glucose where your levels are beforehand if you wanted to try. But
Right.
if you are doing higher intensity stuff, somebody's gonna say I'm gonna do take on a bunch of carbs. That's the time to do it. So there's people that eat work out in the morning. I'll tell them if you're gonna have your oatmeal, have it then.
Right.
That's the time directly after exercise. So.
That's another one I haven't eaten in a long time because in carbs. I mean, we steel cut oats would be the way to go, but they're so hard to make. They take like forever.
Yeah.
All right. Any other aha moments, like something that maybe is behavior changing or something that just surprised you? I know the bananas and strawberries surprised you. You actually did the test of what we tell our patients regarding carbohydrates and protein with your turkey and cookies. So that was a good test. All in the name of science. I did all in the name of science. I tested the Jameson.
You went a different route.
Yeah. There's gonna be other effects of alcohol. So even though the sugar didn't spike that much, I'm not recommending it.
Right, and that's a misnomer a lot too. It is a carb. A lot of times they talk about alcohol. Just kind of touch base on this, but they say you hear this term alcohol. It's empty carbs.
Yeah.
It's not. That's actually not right. It's empty calories. Like there's no benefit to it. There's only negative sides of it.
Right.
And people could say, well, wine has antioxidants, stuff like that, but it's like the juice isn't worth the
sadly,
squeeze.
the biggest study came out showing that any kind of alcohol is not good.
It isn't. It's not.
It's
It's toxic. It's something that your body has to process. It's really bad on the liver. That's why you see alcoholics with fatty liver disease, stuff like that. But my point of it is that obviously it's not a take-home message like, oh, alcohol doesn't impact glucose. It does, as you're saying, it impacts so many other things.
Well, yeah, I still don't know what it's not like we're checking the insulin levels. We're just checking the glucose levels. Right. It's also interstitial, so there could be you have the drink and it still has to convert over to what's recorded by the glucose monitor. But there's other deleterious impacts, so it's by But it was interesting to note, and also with beer, it was also interesting to note that it wasn't like the carb spike I expected. I kind of expected with beer, there was enough carbs in there that the sugar would go up a little bit more than it did.
Yeah.
So again, we're still kind of figuring all this stuff out, like how different foods impact us. But I think that's what's fun about the glucose monitor, and you and I are brand new at it. I know there's a lot of other people on the internet who've been experimenting for a while. There's a lot of biohackers. There's a lot of type 1 diabetics. I mean, this device is for type 1 diabetics primarily. That's why it's historically been expensive and a bit unapproachable.
Mm-hmm.
Even the Freestyle Libre that we're using, it used to have like a device that you had to have that actually monitored.
Yeah, it was never connected to your phone or anything.
Yeah, now it's just an app on the phone. And actually yesterday, I don't know if I didn't tell you this, but there's actually a bunch of other apps that also connect to the Freestyle Libre.
Really?
Yeah.
So there's integrations that they're...
Yeah, there's other third-party integrations where if you want to get a different kind of app that doesn't, maybe has more features than the Libre app. So I found a bunch. I was going to maybe either look at a review or just download a bunch and try the different ones out.
Yeah, because we didn't really talk about we're using this other side app that's integrated with the Freestyle Libre, which is the glucose monitor itself. Basically, it's background connectivity that feeds back to this other system or app that gives you more specific feedback on the metabolic side of things, which is also interesting too for the novice, that if you're not really aware of what these numbers mean, it at least gives you the reference ranges of what your control is. So even though you could be the person who doesn't understand glucose at all, but if you see these numbers and they're spiking and you're like, I don't really feel good,
right?
It's very apparent. You don't have to understand every little nook and cranny when it comes to it. So.
Well, yeah, this other app is a company called Levels. I mean, the Levels is run by, or I don't know if it's run by, but it's endorsed at least by David Sinclair, who's one of the top longevity doctors.
Yep.
Mark Hyman, one of the top functional medicine guys. So, I mean, we're kind of like operating, Levels is sort of operating as a health clinic, and their app connects to Freestyle Libre.
Yeah.
So a lot of things can connect to Freestyle Libre. I mean, now that we've had this experience, and we know that this is basically a sensor, which is pretty low cost to get into, and an app, which is free. It's something went from like a few $100s to $1,000 just to even start, to basically being less than $200 just to get in the game.
Yeah.
And so I think what I want to do is, after we kind of get a better handle on what all of it means, is I think this is great of something where you would do 2 weeks of something like this and just kind of calibrate into good eating, and just knowing how most people are, you're going to uncalibrate after a few months and then pop another one on and then calibrate again, and just kind of, and after a while it'll become a way of life. But look, I mean, eating really perfect was a way of life for me for years, and then it wasn't. And then getting back into it, right?
Back to the fish brain thing. It's like, I like the idea of pre and post also. So you're doing, and I think again, for those who don't really understand, and I have, people in my life that I know that are type 2 diabetics, and it's been years and they still don't understand. And it's, maybe it's an educational thing that they just don't really want to understand. I don't know. But either way, I think with this type of monitoring system, it's a lot easier for anybody. It doesn't matter if you're diabetic or somebody who just wants to understand. So that whole idea of just, here, try this. It's pretty non-invasive to just put it in. And again, I barely notice it's there. I test it whenever I want, just to kind of test these foods. And then, do that for 14 days. It's going to clean it up quite a bit. And then later on, try to do, 14 days later on down the road, just to kind of see where you're at. But I also like the idea that you're mentioning too, is kind of like a check-in, so to speak, where you, no matter what, especially during the holidays or after the holidays or something, you want to be like, I got to get back on track. You put this on.
Well, yeah, we haven't gotten the holidays yet, except for St. Patrick's Day, but I can see where, like, it starts to get around Thanksgiving or Christmas.
Talk about Christmas, Thanksgiving, like sweets galore. Like, I think people, if they were to go, and I get this from a lot of patients, is like they go into it kind of intimidated in the sense that they know that they're going to fail. We often tell patients too, like, don't go doing, if we're looking at like a more specific medically, supervised diet type thing, we don't tell them to start it during the holidays.
No, yeah.
Because it's like we're
just,
realistic, but I
Right.
think in this case too, just since we're talking about it, is that if you do this and put this in, I think people are going to be a little bit more cognizant when they're around,
So
the pumpkin pies. And
my
all
wife
that
came
stuff.
back with all these like special London chocolates and everything, and I mean, I'm just like, nah, I'm not even touching it. I don't feel like touching it. And I think that's what's happening around what'll happen around the holidays is you're gonna see the pumpkin pie, but you're not gonna get a big slice. You'll probably
you
just
might.
get a little bit, you'll nibble it, or you'll make sure you eat something that's protein or fat before you.
Right, you're
have
going to
it.
pair stuff, or you're going to look at it. You're going to be educated enough to know how to navigate that.
Right, like even with the barbecue, a couple days ago, I was like, well, they kept saying, oh, these are homemade, these big cookies, and cookies. First of all, I was able to even just say, listen, now I'm doing a glucose thing, and people are like, okay, cool. Nobody bothered me about it, which was kind of cool. It wasn't like I think honestly, if I said I wasn't like measuring my health, they might even like push the cookies harder on me. But the fact that they do, I'm doing
it was a way out.
It's kind of a way out. But of course, I ended up eating like half a cookie some point in the day, just because I did want to taste it.
And I think
but it wasn't like 2 cookies. It wasn't a full cookie.
Well, you brought it up as the social aspect of it, so it's a hard thing for people to do socially. Like you think whether it's female or male, sometimes often it's males is more of like kind of that, not fraternity style, but like when you go out and stuff, people are like, what do you want, a diet?
Right.
But I think, and I don't know, but I think that something like this, like you mentioned, like, oh no, I'm testing something in a social event, that might be a little bit easier than saying, well, I'm on a diet.
Right, that's true.
And it's funny because everybody.
Or if you just say, I'm watching my intake based on my feedback, my real-time feedback, because I would just pull my app, I'm like, I'm looking at my app right now, I'm 108 or 156, I just want to see, and everyone just kind of got it, nobody really cared. It's almost
right,
like,
and it's kind of like, or people will be interested in it,
Yeah, a lot of
like,
people are
oh,
interested,
cool,
yeah.
like, what does that do? It changes the discussion away from if you just say, I'm on a diet, because I know my friends, I know my mom, like,
Right.
it's like, they get offended. They want you to continue to eat,
Right,
so those are
right,
kind of
right.
the sabotage type situations, and I love them, but it's just also when I'm doing something, I think it's a little easier to kind of bail out when you
just
have
kind of talking out loud. Yeah, you're right. Because I was just thinking like how like if you're choosing not to eat because you're on a diet, some people might feel like, well, you could cheat this one day or whatever, right? Then they kind of feel bad if you're not participating in something, but this is just like.
It's like human nature.
Like you can't. Well, they're gonna feel bad if they make you eat something and they see the sugars go up.
Right.
You force you to eat something, right?
There's a reason why I don't.
Yeah, right. If you're like first, it'd be like, I mean, nobody wants to ruin your health, so I don't think.
But just the concept, I think people would be more interested because everybody's heard that I'm on a diet, and then for some reason socially that just makes people uncomfortable.
I've been talking about it even as I had the doctors. I've talked with the bartender about it, and I've talked to some my friends who were making the food. I feel like people are actually really intrigued and want to know more. So
yeah, because you don't really see it often, and again, the stigma is when you see somebody with it on. And I saw, and I mentioned to you, like I see now more and more of these Instagram fitness people, and you see it on their arm and under the comments. You just always see, what's that thing on your tricep? What is this? And people are intrigued, and they don't really know what it is. But others who might be in the medical field, they see it, and they're like, are you diabetic or what's going on?
Speaking of which, I did have, there's these 4-year-olds and 5-year-olds that are with my neighbors, and they were like asking me, like, Mr. Patel, what's that? And so I was just like, oh, this is a button, you push it, it makes me jump higher.
Yeah, my daughter's 3.5, and she does the same thing. It was like one day where she just kind of...
Yeah, when they start pushing, I'm like, okay, it doesn't hurt you when they're pushing on it, but I don't really want them to keep messing with the sensor, but
yeah,
it was pretty funny. All right, man, any last couple things you think you want to bring up? I think we'll just
just really interested to see where all this information is. I know that we geek out on it because we love the data and stuff like that, but I honestly think that our patients would garner so much benefit from it, from just a wellness standpoint, but also understanding the body and the response, because between us, our responses were not the same.
Right.
Again, back to that GI association, the glycemic index, that's kind of more of a broader term of like, this is what generally happens, but everybody's different. We mentioned kids have a quicker metabolism, they change, like rapidly with what they eat, but as we age, as we get older, it's not always the case, and it's kind of like, for those who put a lot of hurting on their bodies when it comes to insulin and glucose, reactions might not be the same anymore, and that's what I've
well, that's what you were saying, yeah.
You're 38, and I'm realizing now, I'm like, I can't eat cookies like I used to, but.
Right. And you don't have to wait till you put on the pounds to recognize it.
No, you get ahead of it.
I think I'm really excited about this too. I think it's probably the most behavior modifying thing I've ever really done. Like where I just get this instant feedback is exactly changing how I'm gonna eat the next meal and the choices I'm making, which is awesome. Like that's just so empowering to me.
Anytime it affects the psychology of eating in a positive way, I think it's great.
Yeah, to that point, man, people always feel like they're out of control or they don't have control over how they're eating. And this actually does put a lot of control back in.
It does. It makes you feel a little bit better about some things too when you eat it and you're just like, oh, like I know closing out, but I remember when I first started it, I ate a salad, and you're like, because you mentioned you're like, oh, what's the reference ranges that levels the company wants you in? I said 70 to 110. You're like, there's no way you could eat something that's not going to go above 110. Right. And sure enough, I ate a salad with tuna, and it went from 94 to like 102. It was literally like,
that's crazy, man.
No real spike at all,
And I did that with the steak nachos. Yeah. That was crazy.
So,
all right, man. Thank you for doing this. I appreciate it. Hopefully, we'll do some more of these as we keep going. Hey guys, thanks for tuning in. If you stay for the whole thing, this is just gonna be like kind of our fireside chat of our experience with the continuous glucose monitoring. This is sort of like putting theory into practice. We've done a lot of this as medical educators for our patients, but to see it in practice, and then also to see the individual variation. This just gives us that extra bit of individualism or tailored approach or whatever, because not everybody's the same. Not every diet's the same. Not every diet's the right diet for everyone. So learning how your body responds, learning what's right for you is different than what's right for your neighbor or maybe your spouse. And so the only way to do that is just by getting more data and getting testing and doing it. And we're finally at a point where this is affordable and anybody can do it. So I'd encourage you guys to look out on the internet for services that are offering a continuous glucose monitor. There's several of them out there. I think we're going to start doing it pretty soon. So anyway, that's it. Yeah?
Yep.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Thank you. Thanks, Nate.
Yep.